When you hear someone made a horror movie about Pinocchio, your first reaction is probably, why? But after watching Pinocchio Unstrung, I have to say, the twisted childhood universe might finally be finding its footing. I'll be honest, the first two Winnie the Pooh movies and even Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare didn't really grab me the way I hoped they would. But then Bambi the Reckoning came out and showed that this concept actually had potential, and now Pinocchio Unstrung feels like another step forward, a sign that this horror universe might actually be getting better. Now, when it comes to the story, we all know the classic tale of Pinocchio, a wooden puppet whose dream of becoming a real boy. Pinocchio Unstrung takes that familiar concept and puts a much darker spin on it, turning Pinocchio into something far more dangerous, a homicidal puppet. The story follows James, who is understandably terrified when he first encounters Pinocchio, but as the two spend more time together, that fear slowly turns into friendship. The problem is Pinocchio begins to develop his own idea of what protecting James means. He's convinced that he needs to punish the people who have hurt James, and that's where things start to spiral. I don't want to spoil everything because there's actually more going on with the story than just Pinocchio going on a killing spree. The movie has a few things working in its favor, and I think that it'll either meet or even exceed the expectations of people who are curious enough about this darker take on the character. When it comes to the strengths of Pinocchio Unstrung, this movie definitely has a few things going for it. First of all, Pinocchio himself is awesome. The puppet design is genuinely creepy and does a great job of taking the character we all know and making him feel unsettling. The voice performance is also amazing because it captures that perfect balance of sounding innocent while still having something disturbing underneath. That contrast makes Pinocchio even more creepy because he doesn't feel like a typical horror villain. The kills are another major highlight. They are brutal, grotesque, and go way further than I expected. If you're coming into this movie looking for creative horror moments, it definitely delivers. The characters also work better than I expected. Everyone has their own purpose in this story, and the cast helps elevate the material. Robert Englund brings his presence to the role of Cricket, and Richard Brake also does a great job as Geppetto. But the moment that stood out to me the most was when Pinocchio turned one of his victims into a human puppet. That scene was absolutely insane. It's one of those moments where you're just sitting there thinking, did they really just do that? It's a bizarre, jaw-dropping spectacle and easily one of the most memorable moments in the movie. Now, while Pinocchio Unstrung has plenty of jaw-dropping moments, it's not a perfect horror movie. The biggest thing holding it back is that you can still feel this movie is from a franchise that's improving, but hasn't completely reached the next level yet. This isn't a top-tier horror film, but compared to where the Twisted Childhood universe started, it's clear that they've made progress. There are moments where the movie feels like it's just a step away from being something truly great. I also like some of the bigger and crazier moments were saved for the back half of the movie. When the film gets going, it really gets going, but I wish some of those memorable elements were spread out more throughout the runtime instead of building up for so long before delivering. For example, we get introduced to Cricket early on, but then there's a pretty long stretch where we don't see much of him. Moments like that made the pacing feel a little uneven. That being said, one thing I appreciate is that the movie knows what it is. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and there's actually some humor mixed in that works because the film understands how ridiculous the concept is. It embraces the insanity instead of trying to pretend it's something it's not. Overall, I thought Pinocchio Unstrung was a pretty good horror movie. More importantly, I think it's proof that these public domain horror adaptations can actually have potential when they're handled the right way. The Twisted Childhood universe has a bit of a rocky start, but movies like Bambi, The Reckoning, and now Pinocchio Unstrung show that these concepts can work. I'm definitely interested in where they take this franchise next and what other characters they decide to bring into this world. I'm going to give Pinocchio Unstrung a 6.5 out of 10, and I definitely recommend it to the hardcore horror fans who've been curious enough to see if the Twisted Childhood universe is finally starting to find its footing. Alright, y'all, that's all I got for Pinocchio. Be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the movie. Let me know what you thought of the review. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.